Hi everybody, this is Kevin and welcome back to another video. And today I would like to air my grievances against Square Enix and their recent decisions. I have three main points I want to get to, starting with the rumor that's been circulating around them about how they are looking to move away from the single and AA mid-tier titles to primarily focus on AAA titles, and why I believe that is a terrible idea. There's also Final Fantasy XVI's sales numbers and the glass half full and half empty perspective, because yes, there are two ways of looking at it, although I think it's more, the half empty perspective, and I think that's reflecting what Square's been doing in recent months. And then my final point is that I believe Square Enix has abandoned its former fans in its effort to reach the global market, which those are their words, not mine. And you can see it plain as day. It's very disappointing. I understand companies always want to reach new customers, but is it really good to throw away your old fans? I mean, I don't think so. I'm going to explain all that. So let's go back to the first point, and that, of course, is the rumor about how they want to move away from the single and mid-tier titles, or just greatly reduce them, to primarily focus on AAA titles. And with the exception of Final Fantasy XVI, all of their AAA titles have been a disaster. We can even make the argument 16 hasn't really been a disaster, but it hasn't been the success they've wanted. And we can look at such examples as Marvel's The Avengers, which is going back a couple years, I know. But I'm sorry, when I think of Square Enix, I think of JRPGs or action RPG, which that's JRPG too. But, turn-based RPGs or action RPGs or things adjacent to that, I don't think of cape shit. So, to me, it was baffling that Square was even involved in Marvel's The Avengers. You would think that Insomniac, the guys behind the PS4 Spider-Man game, would have handled that. And I, of course, never played Marvel's The Avengers, but I've seen gameplay footage. It looks like shit. There was a ton of microtransactions and gacha aspects, DLC. So, naturally, it failed. So, that's one example. There's also Babylon's Fall, which came out in 2022. And that was in association with Platinum Games. I believe Platinum Games developed it and then Square published it. And the live service lasted for 11 months until shutting down, which that tells you right there what a disaster it was. Which, yes, Square has had a number of gacha live service games fail. There was the First Soldier, which is sort of based on Final Fantasy VII. Zack and Cloud are Soldier First Class or whatever. And they did almost like a Fortnite-type clone, only available on phone, tablet, and maybe PC. But I know they heavily marketed for like the mobile audience. And that shut down after a year or two. And apparently they're working on Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, which is like a gacha version of Final Fantasy VII. Good luck with that. Although that might do well because it's Final Fantasy VII. And again, I don't think many JRPG fans give a shit about shooters. So of course that would fail. But then you look at a success story like Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, which is like this strategy game on phone, tablet, and maybe on PC as well. Which I just saw there's a new trailer for that. They just released Squall, Renoa, and Irvine as characters. Because I guess that's the gacha aspect to it. It's kind of like Final Fantasy Tactics in a certain sense, where you get like cameo characters and they can join your party. Looks pretty cool. I wish if it was on console I'd buy it, but I'm not much of a gacha player. So there's that. Of course, do I even need to say more about Forspoken? I mean, most people who know what's going on, as soon as they saw the trailer, knew the game sucked. There was the reviewers who were kidding themselves, and you can look at pretty much every show reviewer except for Mr. Matty Plays, and they all sort of towed the line. They're like, oh, it's not that bad. When Mr. Matty Plays, also known as Retro Rebound, he reviewed it. He's like, oh, this game fucking sucks. But they were trying to get in the good graces so they'd get the review code for Final Fantasy XVI. That's just how the YouTuber reviewers work. They follow the Dreamcast guy model, if you will. We gotta throw our jabs in at him while we can. At least I'm not making a derpy face. But anyway, so Forspoken, and that game had over $100 million budget. Again, everyone knew the game sucked just by looking at the trailer, the cringy dialogue. If I want cringe Kino, I'll play Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, because Jack did it his way. Freya, that's what she does now, I guess. Which everyone memed the hell out of that. I did a meme video on it if you want to check out my channel. But, so that was a disaster. And Luminous Productions, who was the same like dev team behind Final Fantasy 15, were working on that, and they said it went under, but it was just a subsidiary of Square, so it was just absolved, and they gave them new roles. Such a shame they were able to create a sexy female character like Cindy in Final Fantasy 15, and they put out Forspoken. I mean, what happened? But anyway, so those are the examples of the bad AAA titles, and meanwhile, there are so many diamonds in the rough that sell 1 million, 2 million units that hardly anyone talks about except for the JRPG gamers. Octopath Traveler 2, that game came out last February. It sold over 1 million copies. Triangle Strategy, I believe that sold 2 million copies. Live Alive, which is a remake of an obscure SNES game, sold 500,000 copies, which is pretty good, man. Pretty good. So there's all these diamonds in the rough, which, if you're a JRPG gamer, you love those games. I love those games. And Square had a really weird release schedule last fall, where they released, 5 or 6 games in the span of 2 months. So I don't care if you're the richest guy in the world, you're not going to find, you can buy all those games, fine, but you're not going to find the time to play all these games, considering, if you want to do all the side quests, 100% the games like I like to do, it takes you a good month and a half, 2 months to beat these games. But let's just go through some of the releases. We'll go back a little bit further. So back July 2022, or rather July 22nd, 2022, we had Live Alive, right? Then fast forward a few months, I just figured I mentioned Live Alive because I mentioned the sales earlier. But September 22nd, 2022, the Dealfield Chronicles. I played the demo of the Dealfield Chronicles. It was excellent, but again, I had to pick and choose my battles here, and I went with Star Ocean: The Divine Force. So a week later, September 29th, Valkyrie Elysium. Another game I played the demo of, very much enjoyed. A month later, October 27th, Star Ocean: The Divine Force. A week later, November 4th, Harvestella. Another week later, November 11th, Tactics Ogre Reborn. And then on December 9th, Dragon Quest Treasures. And then on December 13th, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. So we have, like, really good games here. These are your mid-tier titles. They're not your AAA titles, but they're all pretty good games. And I played the demo for pretty much all of them, except for Tactics. I didn't play the demo for Tactics Ogre, and I don't think there was a demo for Crisis Core. But I played the demo for all the other games, and I bought Star Ocean: The Divine Force, my favorite game of 2022. And you better believe I have Star Ocean: The Second Story R pre-ordered, which is coming out next November, in a few months, really. So it's baffling why Square would rush all these games. I understand that they're all sort of different genres, like Dealfield Chronicles Tactics, Valkyrie Elysium's action RPG, Star Ocean's action RPG. Harvestella is like a mix of action and farm sim. Tactics Ogre is tactics, obviously. Dragon Quest Treasures is sort of like a action RPG, I would say. And Crisis Core is an action RPG. So lots of different genres. But if you're a JRPG fan, you want to play all these games. I want to play all these games. Maybe not Harvestella. That one was okay, I guess. But I do want to play Dealfield Chronicle at some point. I would like to play Valkyrie Elysium, Tactics Ogre Reborn, Dragon Quest Treasures. And I don't get why they would release them one after the other like that. Like, why don't you stagger it? Have one come out in August, then one in September, one in October, one in November. Not week after week after week. So they sort of shot themselves in the foot there by releasing them all at once. And then they blame the fans because we didn't buy them. Well, how are you going to buy these games when, again, it takes you like 2 months to beat these games? At least it takes me that long. So I don't understand. To punish people who enjoy these games to make more Forspokens, I don't fucking get it. And then, like, we can fast forward a little bit more for their future releases. So, on September 28th, we're going to get Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai Infinity Strash. What a weird title. Wouldn't it be an Infinity Slash? Star Ocean: The Second Story R on November 2nd. Then Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince on December 1st. So we're getting like one a month. That's better. I guess they learned from their mistake. And then we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Foam Stars! What the fuck is Foam Stars? Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake to be announced. Dragon Quest 12. And then Kingdom Hearts 4 is all on this list as well. So I guess that's coming. I guess they learned from their mistake. And there's obviously less of the mid-tier titles this year that's been announced. But it's just, I don't know, it's just disappointing to think that as a JRPG fan, you know, you'd want to play Forspoken over Star Ocean. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I'll take Star Ocean any day of the week. Anyway, now let's talk about Final Fantasy XVI's sales numbers and how the game came out in June. And within like 2 days, they announced it had sold over 3 million units, which is pretty damn good for its first week. Its first couple days, really. And it's good because it's exclusive to the PS5. And you gotta understand, the PS5 has been out for, I think, 3 years now. It still has no games. It has literally like 5 exclusive games. So that's why I'm still on the PS4, because there's no reason for me to upgrade to the PS5. Maybe if they stopped releasing, you know, Star Ocean on the PS4 and games like that, I'd have to buy a PS5. But at this juncture, I'm content with my PS4. So 2 months later, and Square hasn't updated and said, oh, Final Fantasy XVI sold 4 million now. Oh, now it sold 5 million. They haven't updated that. Isn't that a little suspicious? How have they not been able to update that? So, what I meant earlier when I said the glass half full and half empty, it's half full because 3 million in its first few days on one console, on the PS5, is good. But 2 months later, and they haven't been able to update it, that's not good. And what that tells me, and what I've seen from reviews myself, is that people either really love Final Fantasy XVI, which I've seen, people love it. Some people really love it, but some people really hate it. And I don't see any middle ground. An example, I'm watching Resonant Arc's podcast on Final Fantasy XVI, which they're some of my favorite YouTubers. And they typically go through older games that they play when they were younger and give like in-depth analysis on it. And this is really the first game they're going into blind. And they're more of the old school Final Fantasy fans. I think they said, because they did a podcast on 6, I think they did say that 6 was their favorite. So that's old school. And they did go in with a positive outlook. They still sort of try to have the positive outlook to it, but I can tell, because I've been a viewer of theirs for a number of years, I can tell they're sort of turning on the game. So old school Final Fantasy fans aren't really as appreciative or as receptive of 16 as the new Square Enix fans, which, NU, as a new metal. Which I saw some of the new fans go on about this character named Mid, right? There's a female character, it's Cid's daughter in Final Fantasy 16. And they're like, oh, it's so Mid, because, you know, Mid is like the Zoomer slag nowadays. But they're so fucking ignorant, they don't even realize that that's paying homage to the name of a character from Final Fantasy V. They obviously never played Final Fantasy V, that's the only thing I could deduce. And the reason why I call them the new Final Fantasy fans is because they've been pushing this narrative about how Final Fantasy has always changed, when that's not the case. That's only the case as of Final Fantasy 15. Really, you can say it started with the MMO games. But for the most part, Final Fantasy 1 through 10 was always turn-based. It evolved in the sense that it started on the NES, then it went to the SNES, then went to the PlayStation, then the PlayStation 2. You know, it evolved in that sense, but it's always been turn-based, and then you had 11, which should have never been numbered. It should have just been Final Fantasy Online. Then you had 12, which almost plays like a single-player MMO, but it has the Gambit system. So it's kind of, again, it's sort of the sense of evolution. Then 13, that's turn-based. You know, it's just more graphically, like, oh, look at these flashy animations, because it's on the PS3, and it was meant to showcase how cutting-edge the PS3 was at the time. Then you had 14, again, that should have been Final Fantasy Online 2. That should never have been numbered. Like, 11 and 14 aren't real Final Fantasy games. Get the fuck out of here. Then you had 15, which was the first real, not real Final Fantasy game, in that it was action. And then 16 is the same thing. It's Devil May Cry, Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy in name only. So, you know, it's baffling for me to watch the new Final Fantasy fans say that it's always been the case, when you had 10 games prior, it was all the same thing. 12, okay, whatever. 13's turn-based, and then it changed from there. And I don't like it. I don't like it. And Square has used this argument for a long time now about, oh, we got to go to more action-oriented combat because, you know, the new fans, the kids, they don't like turn-based. They don't have the patience for that. They want to see, like, the cutscenes and the animations and this and that. When, obviously, based on your 3 million sales, it's not cutting it. Because someone like myself, who's an old school Final Fantasy game, who's played pretty much every game except for the MMOs and 12, I don't want anything to do with it. I even played 15. I actually kind of liked 15, but what I've seen with 16, it's Game of Thrones ripoff story. It's fucking shit. You know, we need to go back to Final Fantasy X storyline or Final Fantasy VI storyline. I mean, it's just crazy. And then also this guy Naoki Yoshida, who's also known as Yoshi P. I don't understand why he has the nickname Yoshi P. Like, I guess Naoki Yoshida, so Yoshi's his last name, Yoshida, so it's Yoshi P. Where's the P come from? I don't know where his name comes from, but he just comes across as a fucking weirdo. I understand and I do respect him for taking Final Fantasy XIV out of the grave with A Realm Reborn and getting all these expansions and having it rival World of Warcraft as far as MMOs go. Kudos to him. And because of that, he was given the opportunity to direct 16. But he's had so many strange controversies with the lead up to 16 and since its release. So the first controversy was, you know, the whole debate whether or not the term JRPG is racist, which of course it's not racist. You know, I don't understand where the hell that came from. It could have been, like, some of these conversations could have had mistranslations or they're just going for headlines or whatever. But just for the sake of argument, let's talk about it. And how Naoki Yoshida heard the phrase and didn't like it. Didn't like having the games labeled that way. Whereas JRPG fans like myself, that's the only genre of games I play. You know, games adjacent to that. Right now I'm playing Trails from Zero. That's as JRPG can get. And, you know, with Final Fantasy 16, they're going for more of the Western type feel to it. You know, the Game of Thrones feel to it. That's more or less what the story copies, from what I've seen and heard. So there's that. Then we had based Hideki Kamiya weigh in and say, oh, fuck that. We need to have a JRPG term for action games, J-action games. And then some time passed, and there was this picture of him going around where he's reading these negative comments, and you know, the Final Fantasy 14 and 16 shills were like, oh, he's reading negative comments, which I guarantee I'll get negative comments on this video. You know, you gotta have thick skin, bro. You're in charge of this worldwide game that's on, you know, the PS5. You gotta have thick skin. You gotta be able to embrace the negative comments. And it's like, oh, these guys, I never even met them. They're leaving negative comments. Grow the fuck up. Get some balls, bro. Like, what the fuck is he bitching about negative comments for? It's just so silly. And then most recently, there was this thing about how he was saying it would have been easier if there's only one console. You know, again, reflecting how the sales aren't necessarily as good as they should be. The 3 million and no update since then. You know, it is going to be on PC soon. I think it's either 6 months to a year of exclusivity on the PS5, then it's going to go to PC. And there was just that deal where I guess Final Fantasy 14 is going to Xbox. So Final Fantasy and Square are trying to get more of their titles on Xbox. Good! They can sell more titles. Good. But with the three main consoles, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch, there are different factions of people who play those consoles. Now, PlayStation used to be the home of JRPG gamers, but it's sort of splintered into different factions now, where a PlayStation guy like myself, there's like two factions now. You have the JRPG gamers, which some of them have gone over to the Switch, because it's just easier, because you can do it handheld, and, you know, it's people like Nintendo, and you can get, like, the Nintendo titles. But a lot of the PlayStation games are, you know, the normie God of War type games that I don't give a fuck about, and it's all cinematic. So with PlayStation, you have that. You have the JRPG fans and then, like, the cinematic God of War Spider-Man games. With Nintendo, that's absorbed some of the former Sony fans for their JRPGs, the handheld market, and also your classic Mario, Zelda, Super Smash Brothers, and stuff like that. And then Microsoft has always been the most normie tier gamers, you know, the guys who play Fortnite, Call of Duty, and Halo, right? So those are the factions. 90% of people who have Xbox don't give a fuck about Final Fantasy, and a lot of the Nintendo fans, you know, play the old school type RPGs like Octopath Traveler, or the, you know, Trails from Zero and Azure were put on Switch, or they like Mario and stuff like that. So it's not the fault that there needs to be one console. There's different types of gamers, and most gamers don't like Final Fantasy. Most gamers play Fortnite or Minecraft. Like, that's just the way it is. We're the niche group of gamers with our JRPG sphere. Which is why like, that's another argument, too, about how many copies Persona sold. But the thing with Persona, that's another kind of misleading thing, is that game came out back when it was on the PS3, and it's been re-released a number of times with the Royal Edition, and then recently again on Xbox and Switch, so maybe that's not a good number to use. But even you can use the example of Pokemon, and how that's turn-based, and that sells like crazy, but again, with Pokemon, that's more geared toward kids, and they're exposed to that at a young age with, you know, the anime, and the trading cards and stuff like that. Like, what's the entry point for Final Fantasy? Final Fantasy at this point is like an older demographic of fans anyway, especially with 16 being rated M. So I probably went a little long with that segment. But yeah, I believe that, you know, 16 has its perspective of looking at it. It sold well its first week, I agree. But in the 2 months since it initially launched, how come they haven't updated that it sold 4 million units or 5 million units? It hasn't changed. And watch, when I post this video, it'll come out, oh, it's now at 5 million. Watch that happen. But as of right now, as of recording this on August 23rd, it's still sitting at 3 million. So now for my final point, which sort of tied into Final Fantasy 16 and the whole global market. And they've used that phrase, a lot of companies have used that phrase. I understand companies wanting to reach a global market, a global audience, get more fans. But you gotta understand, man, like, old school Square gave us, like, so many timeless classics like Chrono Trigger, the Mana games, the Romancing Saga games, the old school Final Fantasy games, and they're not marketed to Western people. Like, Western fans can like their Spider-Man and their God of War and their shit like that. You know, just stay in your lane and keep making what you already know. Like, why branch out and make shit that's gonna fail when you have something good? You can keep making games like Octopath Traveler, and again, look at the graphics of Octopath Traveler. It's like pixel art. It's like SNES inspired, the 2D HD art, whatever they call it. HD 2D, I think they call it. Put more of a budget into that. Emphasize those games more, and quit wasting money on Forspoken. The fans spoke when you they literally spoke when you made Forspoken. And they said, we don't want this shit. So hopefully you understand that, Square. And just because you get your somewhat, you know, middle of the road reviews, because these shills are trying to get their next review code from you, don't take their face value. Take the value of us who are giving you money. I have my pre-order in for Star Ocean 2, the Second Story remake. It's in. I put the pre-order in the moment I saw the trailer for it at the Nintendo Direct a few weeks ago. So, I'm ready for that. As far as the other games, I am actually looking forward for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I've been back and forth about, you know, getting a PS5 because I have my backlog of games. I've been playing Trails from Zero, which I say that too to the old school disgruntled Final Fantasy fans who are looking for their turn-based itch. There are plenty of games out there, like the Trails games, for instance. There's that new game that's coming out, Sea of Stars. I played the demo for that. It was very fun. There's Chained Echoes. Everyone was talking about that. Like, these indie games, Octopath Traveler. You know, there's so much other stuff. And I don't know. Like, not every game has to have these cutting-edge graphics for it to be good. Like Star Ocean, The Divine Force. There were memes that it was essentially a PS2 type game. And for that reason alone, it's better by default. Because as the old saying goes, retro always wins. And that game had, like, heart and soul to it. Sure, it had some glitches here and there of Duma navigating, things like that. But it had heart and soul into it. And when I look at something like Final Fantasy 16, I don't see the heart and soul. I just see this pandering. Like, we gotta make everything edgy. We gotta appeal to the masses. And in doing that, the masses rejected you. They rejected you. So, because, like, the people buying their PS5s, they're playing fucking God of War, Horizon, did the number for the new Horizon game, didn't that not do so well either? But they're playing that, they're getting hyped for Spider-Man 2. Oh, like, fuck that shit. I don't play Spider-Man 2. So, I don't know, this is just a disgruntled former, well, I guess I still am a Square Enix fan, but I'm just trying to air my grievances, and I was debating whether or not to even make this video, but, I made it now, obviously. And, hopefully you understand, and if you have any counter-arguments, please leave a comment, and I can respond to, and we can discuss. But it's just coming from the heart here. You know, I sort of had, like, the intention of playing Final Fantasy 16 at some point, because there's no doubt about it. Graphically, it looks very impressive. But as I've spoiled myself about the story, watching Resonant Arc's podcast, looking at the memes on 4chan, and then just seeing the behavior of the new NU Final Fantasy fans and how they're ignorant to the past, I don't believe they've played the old Final Fantasy games. I can confidently say the new Final Fantasy fans have probably only played 7, 8, 9... They probably never played 8, actually. They gave up on 8. But they probably played 7, 9, 10, 13, maybe 15. I don't believe they've played, like, 1 through 6. And I've seen it firsthand, people giving up on 2. 2 is better than you guys give it credit for. And 5 is in the top 5. 5 is better than 7, just so we're aware. Just so we can throw that out there. And that also goes in hand with Retro Always Wins. And Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I will say Rebirth, without even playing it, is better than the original Final Fantasy VII. It just is. 7 is completely overrated. So, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed my ramblings and musings, and I don't know, I guess this video went on kind of longer than intended, but I had to get all these things out there, and it's out there. So, thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. And stay tuned for more videos and rants, possibly rants, coming soon. Peace out.
99.